Last night, voters in Kansas overwhelmingly rejected a state ballot measure that would have restricted abortion access despite shady GOP tactics. And Donald Trump endorsed multiple dudes named Eric in the same Senate race in Missouri. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. There was a huge victory for reproductive rights last night in Kansas, where a proposed amendment to that state's constitution that would have removed abortion protections was rejected overwhelmingly by voters.
There is big news on this big primary night. NBC News projects voters in the state of Kansas have overwhelmingly voted to keep the protection of abortion rights in their state constitution. This was the first test of the right to choose at the polls since the Supreme Court ended Roe versus Wade.
Wow, somewhere right now, Brett Kavanaugh is angrily chugging a Coors Light tall boy with PJ and Squee. Sure, he's making that face, you know? He really manages to look incredibly angry and incredibly goofy at the same time, like a chihuahua who just saw the mailman. This is obviously encouraging news in the fight to safeguard access to abortion, and it's especially encouraging given that anti-abortion activists used every shady tactic they could think of and still lost. For example, the wording of the ballot question was intentionally designed to be as confusing as possible. Now, if the measure had passed, it would have removed abortion protections and allowed the GOP legislature to ban abortion. But the wording of the language was intentionally confusing. Here it is, quote, "Because Kansans value both women and children, the Constitution of the state of Kansas does not require government funding of abortion and does not create or secure a right to abortion to the extent permitted by the Constitution of the United States. The people, through their elected state representatives and state senators, may pass laws regarding abortion, including but not limited to laws that account for circumstances of pregnancy resulting from rape or incest or circumstances of necessity to save the life of the mother." Man, I can't believe they hired the same guy who wrote the iTunes user agreement. I hope voters were given the options yes, no, or duh. That reads like the intro to a college paper you start writing at 3 a.m. the night before it's due. The War of 1812 being a historical event of importance not only to historians, but to those who value history cheaply, was not just a war, but a war that took place in a specific year. And that year was not 1811 or 1813, but in fact, it was the year that, to use the parlance of the time, was sandwiched between those years, a year that is now referred to as the year 1812, but in 1812 was referred to as now. But what exactly is a war? For that, I refer you to this long block quote I copied and pasted from Webster's.com that will take up the next 4 pages. I apologize that the font is different. I tried to change it, but my computer is being a dick. Thankfully, Kansas voters saw through the bullshit and overwhelmingly backed abortion rights, even though a shady GOP group also sent out a bunch of misleading text messages on Monday suggesting that voting yes on the proposed amendment would have protected reproductive rights, when in reality, it would have done the exact opposite.
In Kansas, where that critical abortion access vote is happening right now, voters across the state received this misleading text message yesterday. Quote, "Women in Kansas are losing their choice on reproductive rights. Vote yes on the amendment. Will give women a choice. Vote yes to protect women's health." That is not true. The measure on the ballot does not protect choice. In fact, it would change the state constitution and do the exact opposite.
You know, as a general rule, if your best strategy is to try to trick people into accidentally voting for you, that's probably a sign that you're the bad guys. It's like if in order to get people to watch this show online, we made the title of every YouTube video, "Click here for free boner pills." Although, if you fall for that, shame on you, because the free ones don't work. Fellas, you gotta listen to me here. I know you're thinking, if I can get the pills for free, I can splash out on a romantic dinner, the horse and buggy through Central Park. But none of that's gonna matter when you pop one of the freebies and realize that was definitely a Skittle. There are things in life worth paying for, which is why the only erectile dysfunction email you should ever open is boner pills, reasonably priced. And I know this from experience because a friend told it to me. But that was not the only bizarre subterfuge on display from Republicans yesterday. In fact, in another state, Missouri Republicans tried something even dumber. In fact, this is a story that I think pretty much perfectly captures the current state of the Republican Party. Donald Trump, a man who, let's not forget, tried to overthrow American democracy and is currently under multiple criminal investigations, created confusion in Missouri's Republican Senate primary by endorsing someone named Eric in a race with multiple Erics, without specifying which Eric he was endorsing. And then both Erics bragged that they'd been endorsed by Trump. Amanda Nguyen is not only under multiple active criminal investigations for inciting a coup to overthrow American democracy, but is also beginning to look less like a former president and more like the Nick Nolte mugshot. I mean, is his head getting smaller or is his hat getting bigger? It looks like his hat is some kind of organism feeding on his blood. Look how pale he is. He looks like he's starring in the next Martin McDonagh film as the ghost of an Irish priest opposite Colin Farrell. Look, I know they say all presidents age rapidly, but Trump looks like he's halfway through a Raiders of the Lost Ark face melt. It's like he opened the Ark, his face started to melt, but then he slammed it shut real fast. But then his face just stayed that way. The Ark of the Covenant, we love the Ark. We love the Ark, don't we, folks? They told me not to open, but we had to open it. Many people are saying the Ark, that's where they hid Hunter Biden's laptop. And then I opened it up, and the ghost started pouring out. They poured out the ghost. And that's how I ended up hiring my lawyer. Anyway, that dude, right there, that dude endorsed two Erics in the same race. And then they both debased themselves by scrambling to claim that endorsement.
Just a short time ago, the former president offered his endorsement in a key Senate race in Missouri. He endorsed Eric, leaving it open for voters to choose between the two Erics who are actually in the race, one of whom, the former governor, Eric Greitens, resigned from office 4 years ago after a sex scandal and is now facing allegations of abuse from his ex-wife, which he denies.
Former President Trump announced his long-awaited endorsement late yesterday afternoon, saying, "I trust the great people of Missouri on this one to make up their own minds." He goes on to say, "I am therefore proud to announce Eric has my complete and total endorsement."
That's right, there were two guys named Eric in the race, and Trump was too cowardly to pick one, so he just endorsed Eric, left it up to voters to decide which one, and when one of the Erics won, Trump claimed victory. It's like going to the racetrack, walking up to the betting window and saying, "I'd like to put all my money on horse." You can't go back to the window and claim victory when a horse wins, although you know Trump has done that. When he plays craps, he probably says, "Show me dice." In fact, even Trump's own allies were split on which Eric had gotten the coveted Trump endorsement, with Ted Cruz tweeting that Trump had endorsed Schmidt and Rudy Giuliani tweeting, "Missouri, get out and vote for Eric Greitens," with a photo that said President Trump endorses Eric Greitens. Although I'm just shocked Rudy picked one of the Erics who was actually running and not a third completely unrelated Eric who doesn't even live in Missouri. Missouri, go out and vote for the Eric who's been endorsed by Donald Trump, Eric Clapton. I'm a huge fan because Wonderful Tonight was my wedding song when I married my cousin. I was worried because they said when you get COVID, you lose your taste for cousin jokes. And by the way, this is all just stuff that happened last night. Usually July and August are quiet months in politics, but a lot of crazy has been happening lately. And because we've been off for a week, I missed a lot of it. In fact, I don't have time to get to the rest of it, so to recap as quickly as possible, I'm gonna have to try out a new segment called Seth Recaps What He Missed as Quickly as Possible. You ready? Here we go. The Justice Department is looking at Donald Trump's actions as part of his investigation into the coup attempt on January 6th. Trump is preparing a legal defense and looking for a fall guy. He also said no one's gotten to the bottom of 9/11 yet. Matt Gaetz was caught on a hot mic assuring indicted Trump associate Roger Stone that he would get a presidential pardon. The Department of Homeland Security raised suspicions by hatching a plan to recover deleted Secret Service texts during the day of the attempted coup. The Pentagon also deleted text messages from January 6th. The U.S. killed al-Qaeda's leader in Afghanistan. Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, prompting a possible crisis with China. Majorities of House Republicans voted against bills to codify legal same-sex marriage and contraception into federal law. Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer announced a deal out of nowhere to pass a major piece of the Democrats' domestic agenda, including climate tax and healthcare. Joe Biden tested positive for COVID again, and Ted Cruz was seen fist-bumping a colleague on the Senate floor after blocking a bill to fund healthcare for veterans exposed to toxic burn pits like they had just done a keg stand at a Sigma Chi toga party. This has been Seth Recaps What He Missed as Quickly as Possible. I had COVID, dude. And you wrote that? can't believe they made me do that immediately after recovering from COVID. That's like if Joey Chestnut had to do the hot dog eating contest the day after he got food poisoning. And yes, it is true that I just got back from a week off after getting COVID a second time, or as we call that in show business, a season 2 pickup, which means I wasn't here to comment on any of that. I couldn't even do shows from my house because Biden asked if he could borrow it. And he went to high school with the sea captain. I just want to say to all of you out there who, upon learning that I had COVID, immediately asked, can Wally host the show while you're out? Thank you so much for your concern. Although, if you ask me, it's a little suspicious that all the tweets asking Wally to guest host came from a Twitter account named NotWally12345.
Sounds legit to me, Seth.
Yeah, does it?
Yeah.
Last night was both a promising sign of progress in the fight to safeguard abortion rights on the one hand, and also a perfect case study of what the GOP has become on the other hand. Voters in Kansas overwhelmingly rejected the extremist views of anti-abortion conservatives. Meanwhile, pro-Trump candidates won GOP primaries throughout the country, even in places where Trump endorsed multiple people. They all scrambled pathetically to claim his endorsement. Republicans are still desperate for the backing of any Trump they can get, whether it's Donald Trump, himself, Don Jr., or Ivanka, just as long as it's not
Eric.
This has been a closer look. God's Love We Deliver cooks and brings over 2 million meals a year to men, women, and children living with HIV/AIDS, cancer, and other serious illnesses, and they need your help now more than ever. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, get vaccinated. We love you.